Okay, so I want to make this light fitting in 3ds Max, and so I'm actually going to start by showing you a really handy little utility, I suppose, or an option you've got in the program. It's not perfect, so just warning you about this, but it definitely can be useful when it works. So it's basically the option to bring in an image like this as a reference that you can then trace over. So that's what I'm going to do. So clicking on the little plus in any viewport, you can go to Configure Viewports and then go to Background, and you've got there the option to use a file. So I'm going to click Files and then browse to where I've saved this image of this, Johnson designed lampshade. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to click OK, and you can see it's brought it in, but it's matching the proportions of the viewport. So I'm going to go back and go to Configure Viewport again, and I'll change that option to Match Bitmap, and that's going to keep the original proportions. But notice how it still is based on the viewport. So as I'm zooming there, you can see that the grid changes, but the image doesn't change. So it's really just to give you something to trace over, but it's not going to give you the size or anything like that. You've got to establish that. So what I'm going to do to establish the size that I want is draw something like a rectangle. So I might maximise the viewport just so you can see it a bit more clearly. And then in the Create panel, I'll go to Shapes, and that's really what I want to emphasise with this demo. That, again, lots of things work well when they're made starting with shapes rather than geometry. So, again, the second button that you've got on the Create panel there gives you shapes. And then again, I'm going to make a rectangle. And I'll just click and drag to make that. It's a bit difficult to see. So I'm going to change the colour on the modifier panel. You've got the colour swatch there on the right. If it's got the black and the white, that just means it's set to essentially by layer, and I don't want that, so I'm going to choose maybe a darkish colour, red or blue, or any of these colours that aren't going to get lost in the background. And you can see there, hopefully you can see the rectangle. And so again, I'm going to select that, and in Properties now, in the Modify tab, we've got the size. And it's what, 4 metres by 6 metres, which is far too big. So, oops, don't need to go back to that. So, looking at that lampshade, I've seen it in real life so many times. Again, the reason I've chosen it is because my cousin, who's an interior designer, has this very lampshade in her house, and I'm always obsessed with it. And trying to think how big it is. It's maybe 800 across and let's say 600 high-ish. So the great thing with 3ds Max is you can scale things really easily afterwards, unlike Revit, where you can scale things, but it's in a different way because you've got to scale the width and the height and other things individually. So you want to get things roughly the right size, but what I'm saying is you don't need to make it perfect with 3ds Max. It's much easier to change that afterwards. So I'm still trying to get roughly the right size as a starting point. I've got there 800 by 600 there as the size of the rectangle, and now I'm zooming so that the rectangle is going to line up with the lampshade. And you can see then as well that as I'm zooming, it's jumping. So it's hard to get it to the size I want. So I'm just going to tell you a really good shortcut. Control and Alt with the middle mouse button does a smoother zoom. So you can see there as I zoom, it's not jumping in increments. So you can get a bit more control. So it's Control and Alt together, and then still the middle mouse button or the wheel holding down to get it to zoom like that. Okay, so you can see there, that's the rectangle, and it's the right width. The height I got wrong. Well, it's a little bit subjective. I might just bring the height down or the length it's called here. There we are. So that rectangle is just a reference, so that I know that that viewport is zoomed to the right level where I can start to trace these profiles. So now back to the Create tab, and I'm going to make a new line, and this time I'll check the options down the bottom. So I've got there corner and corner, and I'm going to change the drag type to smooth, and I'll leave the initial type on corner. So what that means, as I'm drawing the line, is if I click a point without dragging, it'll give me a corner vertex. If I click a point and I drag, it'll give me a smooth vertex. Right, so you can see there, as I'm dragging, it's going through the curve. And it's really nice. This smooth option is a curve that's set for you, and you can't really control it that much. If you want to control the curve, the next option below that, you can see there, Bezier gives you complete control over the curve. But this smooth option is often pretty good for a lot of curves. So there you can see I'll do another one, because I know this goes inside. So again, click and drag, and then bring it around, and I'll get my next point. And because I'm going to use this profile for the next shape, I'll do one more smooth. But again, clicking and dragging, and then again release. And so for the final point, I know it's probably a bit hard to see because it's a white background, we're going to click without dragging. It's just line. Yeah, line. Yeah, line does all of your splines and curves and straight lines as well.
Afterwards, going to be based on the radius of a circle.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the smooth line can be any kind of complex curve.
Exactly. That's it. Yeah. So yeah, that's really good to think about that. Yeah, because often in Revit and in maybe interior design more generally with building elements, you will be trying to make things out of arcs because they're buildable. But with more detailed design of things that are manufactured, it's great to use more complex curves because they can actually build them. And then you can think about the difference in that sort of geometry. So that's really good to think about that. And yeah, so it's great though in 3ds Max. The line tool will do all these different sorts of curves. So I'm going to go back and just show you then. Now it's a bit hard to see, again, still with the background there. So I'll just show you here in the left viewport. I'm going to click where it says left, and I'm going to set this one to front as well. There's no problem with that. Having two front viewports is fine. And so in the perspective view as well, we can see that line. And I'll get the top viewport to maybe zoom in a bit more to show that right area where it is. And yeah, so again, it's just at the moment an open shape. So now we can look at some of the editing tools for working with lines. And here it does help if you, well, it's an advantage if you know a little bit of AutoCAD, because a lot of the editing tools for lines come from, or very similar to AutoCAD. And so to get to those tools, you need to again have the shape selected, of course, and then go to spline in the selection options there. So it's similar to what you've done with editable polys. You've got vertex is the first option. And actually I might start with that just to bring, because that point there is a bit low. So I can select that point, bring it up a little bit, and yep, that's fine. The next option's segment, so that of course chooses the segments in between each vertex. And then the final one again is spline, and that gives you lots of the editing tools that are similar to AutoCAD. I've just brought that across so you can see them. Over here, actually, let me just scroll down a bit. Oh no, there they are. So you can see here, again, maybe some terms you'd remember from AutoCAD: fillet, chamfer, mirror, trim, extend, all very similar to AutoCAD. The one I want though is outline, which is similar to offset. So with that outline, I'm going to just click and drag on that shape and bring it in. Does a little bit more than offset though. because it also will connect the two segments. Yeah, yeah. So I maybe went a bit far there, so I might just undo that and repeat it and make it a little bit less. You can see there it's jumping a bit too much though, so I might just go back one more time, and this time I'll click on the outline button and show you the other approach, which is to click and drag on the shape in the viewport instead of clicking on the spinner. So that looks good enough. It's a very thin piece of plastic. And then just to refine that, I'll go back to vertex now, and I'm upping this point up, so I get a maybe different edge there, and maybe I'll even show you I can round that edge off because we want a nice finish there. So I'll go to fillet, and then get the vertex on the corner, and again clicking and dragging, you can see we can get a nice round little edge there. So that's it for the profile. That's most of the work done, believe it or not. So now I'm going to go again, still on the modifier tab, to the revolve modifier. Oh no, sorry, I'm thinking of Revit. It's not revolve. It is. Oh god, what is it again? God, I'm going brain dead. It's not bevel. It's got a different name in Max. Lathe? Yeah, lathe. That's it. Yep, lathe. Should have known that. I worked with in a wood turning workshop for a little while, where they use. If you, do you know what a lathe is? Yep, L-A-T-H-E. Okay, so that's a tool. It's a good one to know, because if you know about these ways of making things, you can design furniture pieces and other things that use these tools. So a lathe is a thing that, especially the big ones, works with a wood turner. So they, if it's for wood, they can use them with metal and all sorts of things, but with wood, which is what I used, that have these huge things that you stick a piece of wood in that spin the wood really quickly, and then you get chisels, and that's the lathe, I think. I'm not sure which bit's the lathe. Is the lathe the chisel or the machine?
I think the machine's the lathe.
Yeah, that's the lathe, and then the chisel, cuts. Yeah.
So aiming at like all table legs and things.
Yeah.
Chair legs that have got them,
Exactly.
revolved, yeah.
That's it, yep, that's it. And you can do beautiful things. There were guys, this is going back 20 years, but there were people who did this their whole lives, you know, and made lots of different things, but yeah, it was a lot of table legs and things for chairs and other things. So, okay, so I can put the lathe modifier on, and then you can see if I go to move it, the whole thing's moving. We don't want that. We want to move the axis. So to move the axis, I'm going to expand the lathe modifier, and there you see you've got the option to select the axis. So now I can move that across, and how easy is that? Yeah. So in Revit, it's a bit more fussy, because if you don't get the axis in the right spot, it won't even let you create the revolve. But 3ds Max isn't as, it's more forgiving, so it will work when you put on a modifier, and you've probably seen with booleans and things like that, they'll usually work, even if the result isn't what you want. No, it's got the angle. Well, you can change the angle. So here it's got the degrees on 360 by default. So you can change it. Fortunately, this one, yep. So I probably should have shown you without the movement of the axis. That's how it began. And then again, just by going to the axis and then bringing that across. I'm not doing it by measurement. I'm just doing it by eye. But there, as long as it lines up with the image here, I'm happy with that. You can see it looks a bit faceted, but that's again just the setting here in the lathe properties. You've got the segments. So I'm going to increase that to get some more detail. And again, it's a brilliant thing to have control over that level of detail, because you only want it to be as smooth as it needs to be. I mean, of course, it will look perfectly smooth if you put in 500 segments, but then you can see it's far too detailed, and that will slow everything down. On a computer like this, it probably won't be too bad, but on a laptop, it would struggle even with that. And yeah, so only do what you need to see it with the smoothness you want when you render. So yeah, 50 is plenty. That's what I've got there roughly. Okay, so I've got that basic shape done, and now I'll be able to use that to make all of these other shapes, these forms. So I'm going to copy it. So holding down Shift, and then I'm going to click and drag on the Y-axis. Now sorry, what have I done wrong? I'm still in the axis, so I'm going to go back to the top to get out of that axis sub-object is what it's called. So when you're at that lower level, that's the sub-object in the hierarchy. We're going to go to the top of the hierarchy using lathe, and now I'll click and drag. But actually, before I do that, I want to show you one last thing. Notice how here the XY gizmo is coming up to the side. That's because it's still centered on the original shape that I made to start with. Now I want it to be centered on this object that I've created. So I'm going to go to the hierarchy tab, and then go to Effect Pivot Only, and then you'll see I can move the pivot. There's a great shortcut there. I'm just going to go Center to Object, and that centers it. And then again, I'm going to remember to turn Effect Pivot Only off, and now I can go back to editing my object. So again, Shift, and then I'll drag the Y-axis and bring that up. Yep, that's right. Shift turns anything into copy pretty much, or any of the transforms, which is generally move, rotate and scale, your main transforms. And here I'm going to choose copy because I want to change this and make the next one different. So I'll go to line, and I can get the original shape. It's a bit hard to see there again, so I'm going to go to my other viewport and make sure I can select it there. And I'll go down to vertex, and I can adjust this, but I also actually want to see the final result, especially in this front viewport. It's a bit hard to see still with the line. So a nice option that you've got when you're working in that sub-object mode is this little button here, the second button below the panel, which is Show End Result. So with that, as I make my changes, I can see the effect on the final lathe. So I want to bring this one down. I'm selecting the two vertices there with a window at the top. I can bring that down, and that's about right. I'll get the next pair. And if you're wondering how many you've got selected or you want to check, you can see it over here in Properties. It tells me 2 vertices selected. So again, click and drag and get that to line up with the image. Get the next one. Yeah. Okay, so this one needs to come in as well. So I'm going to get the X. You don't need to do X and Y separately, but it can help sometimes. So here, again, I've got to bring this one in a little bit as well. And now, last one. Okay, now it's not perfect, and I might not worry too much about the inside. I'm just going to get the outside to be a bit smoother. Yeah, I'm happy with that. And looking in a perspective viewport, that's good enough. Okay, so now I want the next one to be inverted. There's a few ways of doing this. You could mirror, but I think it's easier just to rotate. So I'm going to use rotate. Hold down Shift, and then click and drag on the grey circle. And that will rotate using the Z-axis of your viewport, but that probably doesn't mean a lot to you. But it's the most typical way of rotating for most people. I mean, you can definitely use the other axes, but...
Does it mean it's the one that's flat for the viewport?
Exactly, yeah, that's right, yeah. So, so normally if you're not sure, the grey circle on the outside is probably the one you want. But I'm also going to turn on angle snap, and then it'll snap easily to 180 degrees. Oops, but what did I forget? holding down Shift. Oh, so this button up here. And I'm not even going to check the settings because I just want to do 180. So I'm sure it'll be set to do that. What is it, 5 degrees? Yep, that's fine. So yeah, so again with Shift and then clicking dragging, it's going to copy as it rotates. And again, I'll leave it on copy. So now I can go back to the line. It's going to be on the other side this time, but that's okay. And then again, I'll use the show and result toggle just to make it a bit easier to see what's happening, but you can toggle that on and off, of course. And maybe I'll bring this one in first. So I'm still on rotate, back to move, and now I'll show and result and get that in. And maybe it's got to come down and across. Yeah, that might do. And next one, and just adjusting it. In fact, maybe I don't even need as many, but no, I'll just won't make it too complicated. And then the last one, let's bring that right in. And come back and fix the one that's still out there. And again, notice really important that you select in pairs. And yeah, now because of the way that smooth option works, you've got to bring the points far enough apart so they don't make the curve unusual. That one's still not great, but no, maybe I will. Okay, so I'm going to delete it. So if you press delete, it removes those vertices and keeps the segments connected. So it won't delete the segments connected to that any vertex that you delete. There is a way of doing that, but that's not what I want here. So I just did, again, delete on the keyboard. That's all I did there. And that's, yeah, I think that's probably good enough. It's not perfect, but that's fine, I think. Okay, so that's the next one, and then again with Shift and move, click and drag, and again this is a again actually I'll just leave it as a copy. It probably doesn't need to be, but I'll do a copy. So here, rather than going and changing the spline, I'll just show you can easily scale as well. So you've got the scale option there, and here I want to do a 3D scale. So you've actually got 3 options for scaling. Remember I was saying scaling in 3ds Max is much better than definitely in Revit, but even in compared to AutoCAD. So you can scale just a single axis, so I can just scale, say, X, like you can see there, and that can do some interesting things, or Y, and you can see in the top viewport which direction it's scaling, or you can scale a pair of axes together, so you can do X and Z, or Y and Z, or of course X and Y, which definitely actually could be useful here. But again, I want to show you 3D scale, so to scale X, Y and Z, usually easiest in a perspective or 3D view, so then you can see the 3 axes get highlighted in the middle, and I can click and drag there and scale all 3 together. And there we are. So, so that's it. That's pretty much most of the lampshade done. And then to get the little part that hides the filament, I'll put in a sphere. Okay, so get back to geometry panel, and then you've got 2 types of spheres. You've got spheres and geospheres. Geospheres can be really, really useful for certain kinds of modelling, but normally you just want to use the normal sphere. And again, I'm not going to be too fussy about the exact location. I'm just going to click and drag, pretend you're the person in the factory making the light, and they would definitely try to centre it, but they wouldn't get their rulers out to position it every time, so you don't have to either. So again, just by eye, I'll click and drag to make a sphere, and then use the move tool and bring that down to position it, and then I can always make it a little bit bigger. So there we are. And then very last thing is the pole holding it up. So for that, we'll just make a cylinder. Now there would be a bit more inside to hold it all together and take the electrical things, but I'm not going to worry about that. We probably don't need to see it. So again, just put a cylinder there, of course, bring it up to set a height, and then just like the sphere, I can move that down and go and adjust the radius, change the height, and there we are. So, exactly, that's right, exactly. If you can't see it, there's no point modelling it. That's right, exactly, yeah. Even though later, if you're going to have it manufactured, then you would go to that level, but no, if you're doing presentation, so that's exactly right. So, I'll do a quick render setup now, and so for that, it's going to be fairly quick. I can quickly go over making a material. So you've got the two options for materials. So you've looked at both. I think you would have looked at the compact material editor and the slate material editor. If you're working on big, complicated projects, then the slate material editor is fantastic. You get that node-based approach, but for something simple like this, you should definitely be looking at using the compact material editor. And we've got there all the spheres, and I'll start with actually, I'll go show you the library. So if you click on Get Material, then you've got the library, which is very similar to what you have in Revit. So we've got all these basic material types, and there is a plastic, here we are, starting material, Autodesk plastic. So I'll double click on that, and that works. But I'll show you if you want more pre-made materials, I'll go to the next slot over here, and then when you scroll down, you'll see, depending on the rendering program you've got open, you should have the Autodesk material library as well. And there's plastic, and we've got some more fully made different kinds of plastic, and there should be some translucent plastic materials here. So we've got some transparent plastic, which might be alright, and don't have any translucent would be nice, because translucent materials always take a bit of setting up. I'm going to try this for resin. That hopefully is a translucent one. Yeah, it is. Great. Now, but it's not showing a very good preview. So I'm going to put the background on and see if that helps. But no, so that's, well, we'll see how translucent it is. I'll start with the other one, and then if we've got translucency, no. Oh, here we go, transparent. And that will give us, what's it doing here? Oh no, it's just using a preset. So, yeah. Okay, so you've got to watch out. It's a bit like Revit. You have different templates, and they give you different settings. So because I want some translucency, I've got to set the right starting material, and the trick there is that it's not using the plastic. Even though I want plastic, it's not using the plastic template. Takes a bit of getting used to, but that's just the way these different material types are set up. And so often you want what's called the generic material in this case. Even though, again, I do want plastic. So here, this is what I'm going to use, and I'm going to adjust the depth there. It should have, in fact, maybe the colour, sorry, is what I need to do to bring that down and make it less less transparent. No, that should do it. So I'm terrible with the physics of materials like this. Again, they're physically very correct, but again, you've got to maybe look up the material properties to make sense of some of these things. And I don't think the depth is the right one either. No. And it's not intuitive unless you have a good understanding of material science. So anyhow, we could make this work, but I'm going to show you another one. So here we've got the physical material. Yet another one. So this physical material, you can see here, has presets. And I've got here, there'll be a plastic preset. Yeah, glossy plastic, that'll do. And then, right, with that, I can set a transparency. Right, and I've just double clicked on the sphere to make it a bit, or to bring out that preview so you can see it. So to make the transparency clearer, I'm going to turn the background on there. And so now, as I bring that transparency value up, well, we can see more of the background coming through, but then we've got some other things to think about. Again, even a physical material, which is not as hard as the other ones, still has these properties that come from material science. So here it's the index of refraction. I'm pretty sure that is bending the light there. So if I take that down.
Yeah, if you imagine that was a glass sphere, it would be distorting when you saw through it.
That's it, exactly, yep. And so, yeah, so one should be, is basically air, and that I thought would have been smooth, but I'm going to turn the roughness down to 0. What else have we got? Roughness here, so I'll make that 0. That's still. There we go. That's better. Okay, so now it's starting to work. Okay, so I've made it very transparent just so that you can see the transparency. Now I'm going to bring the transparency back down. And there we are. So, have I given you a little talk on primary colours? RGB? Yep, and the reason I do that is because when you get to this level, you do need to get the physics right. You can't just go back to the things you learn when you learn painting and things where, you know, you learn red, yellow, blue and all these things that aren't technically accurate. So, yeah, so as long as you can work with red, green, blue, you can set any colour you need. And there, I'm just going to make this more of a bright white. And you can see there, red, green and blue are nearly at 100%, but not quite 100%. It's a little bit warm, so I'm going to bring the blue down a bit, bring the others up. The red is the one I want up, maybe to max. Yeah. Don't want to get into, well, we should have smoother reflections. I don't know why they're so rough still. We don't have any maps there. And that colour's showing up really strangely as well. There's something really funny going on there. Yeah, that's all fine. Don't know why. Yeah, again, these physical materials can be really brutal. Maybe the coding parameters I didn't look at. No, that's fine. Oh yeah, so. Should all be fine. Yeah, so I'm just going to check it when it renders. It might be alright. I think it's just the preview that's not showing properly. So I'm dragging these, I'm dragging the material onto these objects. Just drag them all on. Yeah, Okay, so I think that'll actually render all right. And then we need a light. So I'm just going to go back and make a light on the Create tab, and I'll just make a free light and put it in the middle. And to be honest, once you get V-Ray, you probably won't go back to using these materials, even though they are very physically correct. They definitely, you can see, have some difficulties. I think they made a big mistake trying to make it a a non-biased renderer. In other words, it's physically correct, but do we need that? And that's why, you know, V-Ray and programs like that, they're not correct in terms of the physics, but they work better and they actually look more realistic, which is the really strange thing. Okay, so this sphere is at the moment going to block that light. So I'm just going to right click and go to Object Properties, and oh no, I will turn. I want it to block the light. No, so I'll leave it like that, and I'll cut it instead. I'll use a boolean. So I'll just slice it. Sorry. So here I'm going to turn slice on, and then sorry, I'm rusty with this. So it's not slice. It's slice, but it could be wrong. Oh no, it's hemisphere. So I'm going to use the hemisphere option to take away part of the sphere, and then I'll just invert it. So you can rotate. That might do for now. So then I'll do a quick render just to see how it's all working. So bring up the render setup, and then I'll go to rendering and get the exposure control, and do a render preview. Yeah, so it's rendering. So we probably need a light on the outside as well to see the top of the lampshade, and I'll just take the exposure value up, so it's a bit darker. But I'll need to adjust that more in a minute. And then I'll go and make maybe just another free light for now outside, and then, oops, sorry, I didn't want to zoom in that viewport. So I'm just undoing the views. I'll zoom in the other viewport and then bring that light up. And then again, get my render settings back. There we go. Okay, so maybe I can make it a little bit brighter. Yeah. Okay, and a good trick there is to have a few lights for ambient light sources. So I'm going to copy that light that's above and make it just an instance so I can control them all together. Okay, because a pendant light like this would typically have light coming from the environment, lighting up things from the outside. Yeah. So okay, so now we can get the render set up. Okay, so I can look at the material, definitely. I've got to maybe change that. So, yeah, I'm not happy with that material, so I'm going to go back. It's that roughness setting, which I have to look at. Actually, I'm going to go here. Let's go to standard and see. That one's sometimes a bit easier, but it's still got an issue. I don't know what I'm missing there. So I'm going to get, I want to change it to a different material. So an easy way of doing that is to get the material name. So here it's 03 default. I'll give it a better name, so I'm going to call that, white plastic. And then I'm going to copy that name, just by right-clicking and choosing copy, go to the other plastic material that I had, and paste that name. And then I'm going to use the put material to scene button. And that simply is going to substitute one material for another. And that's a really handy technique. So now if I render again, it's going to tell us we need mapping. Right, so it does use a map. I can't stand these physically accurate materials. And yeah, so that one's still not great, so I'll get another one from the library and I'll switch it over. So again, I'm going to go into the library and maybe we'll get a smooth or PVC. Yeah. And that's got transparency. Brilliant. That one should be good. Okay, so let's try that. So again, this is the material name, white plastic. So again, I can just copy that and then go to the new one that I want to use, right click and paste, and then again, put material to scene. And then just render again. Again, don't worry about the mapping, I'll come back to that in a sec. Yeah, no, yes, and I'll turn that on, yep. So, yes, I'll turn on transparency, maybe get a bit of translucency. Okay, I better put the mapping on. So, the reason we get that message is because this material uses some sort of texture map. So, it doesn't really need it, but it's telling us it wants it. So, I'll put it on. So, I'm going to select this object, and then on the Modify tab, you can see it's actually got an option to generate mapping coordinates. We don't need to apply a map. You can, but it's easy here to generate mapping coordinates, and that's it. So I'm going to do that for each of these objects. Don't need it. There we are. So now when you render, it just renders, even though you won't see much of an effect from the mapping. Okay, so then, and this is where it's great rendering with 3ds Max. If this was Revit, it'd be very difficult to make that render better. But with 3ds Max, same rendering engine, but you can go and customize more of the settings. So I can increase the quality, of course, just like Revit, but then we can also turn things on like noise filtering. Which should eventually smooth it out. Might take a little while. You can see there it's only still partway into the rendering. I'll probably pick a bad example to start off showing you rendering because lights tend to be a little bit involved. But maybe you can see already that it would look really good once everything was working. And also, another thing that would help here is having an environment, something for the light to bounce off. So a simple environment you can put in, this may be the last thing I'll do, very simple environment is a box. So I'll just make a box and then click and drag to put it around my light. My light's down below the ground plane, that's fine, so I'll just move that down. So I've got a box around my light, maybe I'll bring it down even further, and then just maybe take the height down. Right, now that's essentially like a little room around my light. But the problem is, yeah, the go to, that's right. And also, you've got to check as well, it depends on the rendering engine, but sometimes the normals can be facing the other way. In other words, the surfaces won't be visible from the inside. If that happens, you just need to put a normal modifier on. But in this case, it's fine. The ART engine doesn't need that. So again here, I'll just put the material that I used for the, actually I'll use one of the other plastics I made earlier. So here I've got the plastic that is solid that I might use, and it's still got the name white plastic. So I'm just going to change that name, otherwise it'll overwrite the material that I've used for the light. A little bit bright though, but that's the effect of the light. So we need to go back and adjust the transparency, or alternatively, you can change the colour of that plastic. Make it darker. There we are. Okay, so I won't go into it now, but then you'll see there are options to set channels and have that cut out automatically when you save the file. So it'll have a transparent background, and then you can easily overlay that onto a background in Photoshop. But actually, because that can be a little bit technical, it's not a bad thing to try doing masks in Photoshop and get used to that way of cutting things out. Masks.
I think a quick mask, not rendering out of the mask.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. That's. I mean, I won't do that now anyway, because that's a bit more involved. But masks in Photoshop are not too bad. Yeah, quick masks are good, and then but you'll find often with the way the shortcuts, things like paste into, they'll actually set up layer masks automatically. And and if you know how to do quick masks, layer masks are just as easy. And the advantage with layer masks is that you can always see them in your layers, and a bit easier to, I suppose, relate to when you can see the way the mask is working. So maybe there's something I can show you quickly. I don't know why Photoshop. Oh, it's just going over the top here. Yep. So. Okay, so you can see there that's still rendering, but I won't leave it going. I'll just stop it there. So it would get smoother and smoother, but I'll just stop that for now. And then, okay, so to save it, you click on the Save Image button there, and I'll just call this render. And I won't go too much into formats for now. We'll just save as PNG. And sorry, I can't see PNG. There it is. And leave it on. No, I don't want 48. I'm just going to go 24-bit. Okay, so we can open that in Photoshop. And then I'll open some sort of background. Actually, so I thought there were some rooms in there. Look at this one. Alright, no rooms. Okay, let's just get one. Right, look at it. Probably not the best example, but I'll live with it. So, okay, so I'll save that. And okay, so there are many ways of moving things from one file to another, but easy, quick way, Control A, Control C, go to the file you want to bring it into, and Control V, and then Control T, transform, and if you hold down Shift, with this version, it scales with lock proportions. Have any of you seen the new version, Photoshop? Works a little bit differently. Yeah, it's torture. Anyone who's used... Oh, I hate the new version. It's awful. Yeah, oh, they made it for new users. They didn't... so they've changed a lot of shortcuts and things. Yeah, so especially that scaling. So many old users I've known of. It's torture, because not being able to scale. Yeah. Yeah. And it just locks the proportions. And it's very hard. There is a setting. You can turn it off. It's in, if you go into preferences, you can set it back to the legacy option. Yeah, that's the worst thing. Apart from, there are some good things in the new one, but that is just painful. So, yeah, if you don't know what I'm talking about, in the new version, if you stretch or scale with the corners or with the sides, it still scales with lock proportions. Right, so it always, in other words, scales like this, the way that it works with Shift. Yeah. And there's no option up here to turn that off. Right, so the only way, if you hold down Shift, then it works the way that it works without Shift now. But if you want to go back to having it the way that it should be, really, and I've even talked to some developers at Adobe, and they even said, oh, it was a mistake. We didn't mean it to be like that. And yeah. So anyhow, but there are some good things in the light. So, all right, so we've got the light there. I probably should have made the cable a bit longer, but I'll live with it like that. So let's just make it a little bit smaller, maybe. Okay, so now I want to cut it out. So zooming, I'm just holding down Alt there to zoom with the wheel. And great chance to look at layer masks. So it's great if you've already looked at quick masks. That's the one down here. They're good. But again, layer masks. Well, don't say they give you more control, but you can at least see what they're doing really easily. That's another point. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah. So I'm going to start with reveal all. You can see it goes to black and white, foreground and background colours. Well, you can't see on the projector, but trust me, that's what I've got. It's a shame the projector's cutting things off, but I'll just show you here. So there I've got black and white, and I'm just going to use the brush tool, and I'll make my brush bigger. If you're wondering how, I'm just using the square brackets on the keyboard. Right-clicking to change the size does the same thing, but square brackets is a nice shortcut. And I'm painting in white, which does nothing. I'm just going to bring it back so you can see my layer. So there's my layer with the layer mask with the white mask. So I'm going to switch my foreground and background colours. So black is the foreground, and I'm painting with black. So black takes away, just like quick mask. And then white, obviously, keeps things. So I'm just going to paint away all of this, and right. So then maybe so it's a bit clearer why layer or why masking in general is so good. Let's say I make a mistake. No, I obviously don't want those things to be taken away. So I'm going to switch back. You could undo, of course, but maybe you would have done some things after this. You might not have realised that, and then you want to go back and bring some things back that you've taken away. So we'll switch to paint with white again, and you paint back the image. So you can go back and forth. And as James is saying, it's non-destructive. Right? And so it's a great approach. You can, again, paint away most of it fairly quickly, usually. And there we are, very quickly. And if you've heard about deep etching, once you know layer masks, you'll realise deep etching is kind of a, I don't want to say it's amateur level, but it's, you know, a lot of graphic designers like you going on about deep etching. I don't think realise you get a much better result if you mask it instead. Deep etching, they tend to delete the things they don't want. So, yeah, great approach using masks. And zooming in further now, I can make my brush smaller and just keep refining and refining. And again, I know that if I go too far, it's not a problem. I can bring it all back. And the other thing to remember is that when you're painting, with a soft brush, you're effectively painting with grey edges. And so you can get into, again, I think it's much better than deep etching because you get a soft edge. Very similar to what you get with feathering, but you're controlling it. And so you can get a perfect blend. And if you think about the way light works, especially in relation to photography, which is really what we're doing here, those pixels at the edge of an object will be a blend of the background and the thing in the foreground. And that's why it's really nice to have soft edges rather than cutting with really hard edges. But don't be too obsessive. I've been obsessed too much about this over the years. Done lots of montages and things, and you do these perfect blends, and then you see someone who's just cut very quickly and zoomed out, it looks, just as good quite often. So don't be too obsessive, but if you need to have that control, you've got that option. There we are. So hopefully I'll give you some ideas. I know it's due tomorrow, but if you're like me and working up till midnight the day before things are due, then you might still be able to apply some of these things. And I'll just tell you, I had an assignment due on Sunday night, and I submitted it as usual, 11:58. It was good. I mean, I'm happy with it, but that's just the way I work. So, and I had to research things that I knew nothing about. At about 10 o'clock, I was still learning things. Huh? Yeah, well, that's it. But I mean, see, that's the thing. Parts of it it's okay, but zooming out, you could sort of see there was a bit of roughness there. So it doesn't hurt to be able to go and fix those things. All right. So anyhow, that's hopefully enough, and might be useful for your assignment, but also moving forward, looking at those different modelling approaches and rendering a little bit as well.